Iraq's foreign minister arrives in Moscow. Will it be peace or war? In Baghdad, Saddam Hussein says Iraq is ready for the mother of all battles. And on the battlefront, the biggest artillery firings yet. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight from Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Good evening. Artillery and ground rockets thundered on the border of Kuwait and Iraq today, preparing the way for the biggest American-led military assault since D-Day in World War II. At the same time, the foreign minister of Iraq is in Moscow. He is meeting at this hour with Mikhail Gorbachev and Saddam Hussein's response to the last-ditch Soviet peace plan. Moscow correspondent Anthony Mason begins our coverage.
Dan, no word yet on the Iraqi response to the Soviet peace initiative. President Gorbachev and Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz have been meeting for the last 2 hours. We're not sure if that meeting is over yet, but we are expecting a statement very soon. The Soviets themselves are expecting nothing less from Aziz than a clear-cut and positive answer to their peace initiative. In other words, a timetable for complete and unconditional withdrawal. But we are still waiting for results of that meeting, to that historic meeting, which has taken the last 3 hours. Aziz arrived 20 minutes before midnight Moscow time, giving reporters no word of the response he was carrying from Baghdad. He was immediately taken by limousine into the center of the city for a midnight meeting in the Kremlin with Mikhail Gorbachev. The group was small: Aziz and his Moscow ambassador, Gorbachev and his closest advisors on the Middle East. Even before it started, the Soviets knew that this was a race against time.
If the ground actions start, the chance for political solution will be almost dead.
So the Soviets know this is their last chance. If this meeting doesn't produce peace, a ground war is almost inevitable. If the Iraqis have come to buy time, the Soviets almost certainly tonight are not going to be willing to give it to them. Dan?
Thanks, Anthony. Earlier today, Saddam Hussein spoke to his people for the first time in 10 days, but he gave them little hope for peace. Throughout the Middle East and the world, people gathered to listen to Baghdad radio as Saddam spoke for 40 minutes in what was described as a recorded address. The Iraqi leader did not say directly if he had accepted or rejected Mikhail Gorbachev's peace plan, but he gave no hint of any new concessions. He said he has offered to withdraw from Kuwait, but now President Bush wants more, revealing, Saddam said, Bush's real aim: to destroy Iraq. They want us to surrender, he said, but they'll be disappointed. Then, in effect, he challenged the Allies to a ground war, saying they don't know the capability of Iraq's armed forces. Saddam told his people it will be a great battle of victory and martyrdom. Joining us now for insight and reaction to Saddam's latest moves, David Martin at the Pentagon, CBS News consultant Fuad Ajami in New York, and Wyatt Andrews at the White House. First, Wyatt, what was President Bush's reaction?
Dan, the White House tried very hard today to keep the issue very simple and very focused, and that is either Saddam Hussein puts his troops in reverse or he faces a continued war, including preparations for a ground war. Nothing that happened today, not Saddam Hussein's speech or events so far in Moscow, has changed the White House outlook. The president himself dismissed Saddam Hussein's speech as full of invective. He called it disappointing. And Dan, the White House let it be known that even if the Soviets tonight cut a deal, if it is unacceptable by virtue of all the UN resolutions, the president would not feel himself bound by that. Dan?
Fuad, anything new in Saddam's address today, which was pre-recorded?
I don't really think so, Dan. I think Saddam would love to have a ceasefire. And by ceasefire, we must understand exactly what Saddam means by a ceasefire. He'd love to see an end. He would love to see a pause in the air campaign against him. And as you said in the opening, it's really interesting. Saddam is almost inviting us to a ground war. And his idea of war is to say that the campaign against him, that the American-led coalition has so far avoided a showdown. He wants the showdown, and for him the showdown is on the ground.
Fuad, you've been listening to this man's speeches for a very long time with particular attention over the last few months. Let's talk about tone. Anything different there?
It was very interesting to me, to use a term from the language of sport. This really was a man who was zoning the speech. It was he's no great orator, but this was his most compelling speech. I listened to it in Arabic. It was remarkable. This is a man, I think, in my view, if you listen carefully to this speech, who understands that war begets its own goals. who understands that now the American-led coalition is no longer interested in his withdrawal from Kuwait, but is targeting him and is going for his power base. It's a man who understands what this war is truly about. It's about him and it's about his regime.
David Martin, there is a school of thought here that the momentum to the ground war is already so far advanced that it is going to happen. Is today's very heavy artillery shelling an indication of that?
Well, Dan, as recently as 3 o'clock this afternoon, the Pentagon was saying on the record that the order for a ground offensive has not yet been issued. Now, obviously, that can change with one phone call or one meeting, but I think what's going on now are these cross-border operations, including sending troops in on the ground, but they are for the purposes of reconnaissance to find out what the enemy's up to. If they encounter the enemy, they open fire, they even take prisoners. But when the ground war starts, the U.S. is going to go in and keep going, probably all the way to the Tigris and Euphrates River valleys, and they're going to stay in until the enemy is either defeated or surrenders. And also, it's not going to be just a few tanks and a few helicopters. It's going to be several divisions. So we'll know when the ground war starts. Dan?
Well, we have just been told there is a Scud alert. A Scud alert has just been sounded. We have no other details except that there has been a Scud alert, and we're waiting for that. We want to go now to Moscow, where Anthony Mason is standing by. Anthony?
Dan, the press conference has just begun. We don't have the results yet, but in a moment we should have the results from Moscow of the Iraqi response, and we'll be back to you shortly.
Would cease to exist because it's for the corresponding resolutions of the Security Council. So thus those resolutions would cease to be in effect. Six. Right after the ceasefire, all the POWs will be immediately released. Seventh. The withdrawal of...
Well, here in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, you can hear the sirens in the background. There is a Scud alert. This is the second time today that we've had a Scud alert. Previously, the Scuds fired at Saudi Arabia were destroyed over a base north of here. Now, what we're going to do is listen for a second and see if there's a response of Patriots here. Earlier today, no Patriots were fired from here in Dhahran. They were fired, as I say, elsewhere. I think what we should do is these sirens are underway here. We'll get our equipment nearby just in case we need it. What happens is that many people go to air raid shelters, and if you hear or sense some movement off to the side, that's a great deal of what's happening here at the moment. Generally what happens is the sirens go off, and then if there are going to be Patriot missile firings from here, we would see or hear them within the matter of perhaps a couple of minutes. Now, this alert is from the U.S. military. This Scud alert, as I say, the second one we've had today. There has been a theory in recent days, based on some intelligence, that Saddam Hussein had moved what Scud launchers he still has north of Baghdad, still within range of at least part of Israel, but basically out of range of the bigger U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia, such as those around Riyadh and those around Dhahran. And if true, that would account for the fact that the more recent Scud firings toward Saudi Arabia have been at more forward bases, those up closer to the Kuwaiti and Iraqi border with Saudi Arabia, as was the case earlier today. We see no Patriots up yet, and we've heard nothing in the air that would indicate that Patriots have been fired here. U.S. military officials confirmed today that Allied forces are already making armed forays across the border into Iraq and Kuwait. That would suggest that full-scale ground war may be imminent. That possibly is one of the reasons that Saddam Hussein and his forces have been firing their Scuds today. Both sides have been a little more aggressive in recent days. There also is the fact that today was a bad flying day because of the weather. Far fewer U.S. and other Allied aircraft could get up today. That means it's more difficult for them to spot the Scuds as they fire. Of course, the Scud firings are picked up on satellite, but anytime you have this kind of bad weather day, it just makes it a whole lot more difficult for the warplanes to see where the Scuds are being fired from and to destroy them. Now, the sirens have stopped here in Dhahran for the moment, but there is no all clear. As we wait and watch for what may happen here, let's take a break. We'll be back with you shortly.
Ziploc presents Fingerman.
Hi, I'm here to demonstrate a big new idea. That's right, introducing the new Gripper Zipper from Ziploc. Now the easiest closing bag there is. In fact, I can even close it, whoa, blindfolded. I know it's closing because I can feel the zipper grabbing hold. It's locking. Feel it close the first time, every time. And you don't have to see it to believe it. Ooh. Ziploc bags with the new Gripper Zipper. The easiest closing bag there is.
Introducing a new idea in air freshening, Glade Country Pottery.
Put out the pottery, put it here, put it there.
Simple, handmade pieces of glazed pottery.
Put it everywhere, put out the pottery. Put the fresh country air anywhere.
The porous clay releases the light, fresh scent for 30 days.
Just put out the pottery, put the fresh country air everywhere.
Put out the pottery, new Glade Country Pottery.
Ask me what counts most after 40 years in the car business, and I don't have to think twice. 1, the minivans. We invented them. 2, driver's airbags in every car we build in this country. What do we do for an encore? Put them together. Minivans with a driver's side airbag. Nobody else is doing it. You still have to use your seatbelt with a minivan airbag, but it will save lives. A lot of lives.
The Scud alert is still underway here in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. The sirens have sounded once again. There have been at least one pop in the air, but we're not quite sure what that was. But things are developing very quickly in Moscow as well. Let's go to Anthony Mason there. Anthony?
Dan, within the last few minutes, Vitaly Ignatchenko, the presidential spokesman for President Mikhail Gorbachev, has appeared to announce that Iraq has agreed to a full and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. But after the cessation of hostilities and the withdrawal of 2/3 of Iraqi forces from Kuwait, that the economic sanctions would be lifted, that the withdrawal of forces would be monitored by forces not directly involved in the conflict, and that all POWs would be released after the ceasefire. Mr. Ignatchenko said it was a positive outcome. This comes after some 2 hours of meetings between Mr. Aziz and Mr. Gorbachev. This is definitely what the Soviets wanted and asked for, and now the ball is very much in the court of the Allies and the United States. So once again, Iraq has announced that they will agree to a full and unconditional withdrawal, and that after the withdrawal of 2/3 of their forces, economic sanctions lifted, and that the withdrawal will be monitored by forces not directly involved in the conflict. Dan?
Let's go now to Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Wyatt? Well, Wyatt apparently stepped away to see if he can get any White House reaction. A Scud alert still underway here in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. The U.S. military put this alert on. It is their red alert, their highest alert. Mentioning again that there were Scuds fired into Saudi Arabia earlier in the day, destroyed by Patriots. If there have been any Patriots fired during this alert, we are not yet aware of it. Now, as Wyatt Andrews tries to get some reaction to the developments in Moscow, it may be worth mentioning that last Friday there was considerable excitement. A lot of hope was sparked off when there were a couple of lines indicating that Saddam Hussein was prepared to withdraw from Kuwait, but then very quickly the hopes were squashed because so many conditions had been attached, including one condition that had to do with linking the end of the war with solving what were called other Middle East problems, widely interpreted to mean Israel's difficulties with the Palestinians. Now, what the fine print is, if any, in this latest offer by Saddam Hussein to withdraw what is said unconditionally from Kuwait is unclear at this moment, and that's what we're working on as this broadcast develops. Now, As we wait for Wyatt Andrews to get the White House reaction to the development in Moscow, let's report that 7 American soldiers were killed today when an Army medical evacuation helicopter crashed here in Saudi Arabia. Officials said the chopper was trying to land in the bad weather. Last night, 2 Army helicopter pilots were killed when their chopper went down during a reconnaissance mission. Iraq fired 2 Scud missiles at Saudi Arabia today, but they were both shot down by U.S. Patriots. In a rare daytime attack, the missiles were aimed at a major Saudi military base. The Patriots did their job, and the debris fell with no damage or casualties. Up at the border, U.S. and British forces cut loose with their biggest artillery and rocket barrage of the war. 4 batteries of U.S. multiple rocket launchers fired off several hundred rounds of rockets, each capable of scattering hundreds of bomblets. The barrage was aimed at concentrations of Iraqi troops and armor, deep inside enemy-held territory. We'll be back in a moment with more about this developing story, particularly Saddam's offer as passed through Moscow, so stay here with us.
Okay, what's new with the new generation of Oldsmobile? Still wondering?
This is a new generation of Olds.
You know, you get so much more out of cold mornings when you've got energy. That's why I eat grape nuts. And I found a great new way to make it. Hot. Just pour your grape nut cereal, add milk, and microwave it for 1 minute. You've got this warm, hearty taste that feels so good. And a natural energy source to help keep you going. So, even if it's a cold morning, hot grape nuts helps make it a good one. Try it yourself.
Hot or cold, breakfast with Post Grape Nuts helps keep you going strong all morning long.
A cold always starts small. A stuffy nose, a little sneeze. But before you know it, your cold is full grown. Achoo! That's when you need Dimetap, the grown-up medicine. If it was any stronger, you'd need a prescription. Maximum strength Dimetap Extend tabs work for 12 full hours. It's the way to relieve the congestion and sneezing of a full-grown cold. Dimetap, relief for the full-grown cold.
Back in 1966, Oldsmobile brought on a revolution with front-wheel drive. Today, the evolution of Smart Track, the combination of all-wheel drive and anti-lock brakes, will again take the world by storm.
This is the new generation of
Car dealers are complaining about slow automobile sales. So why are Nissan and Saturn planning for better days? The story is Positively Nashville, tonight at 10 o'clock.
The all clear has sounded here in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, after the Scud alert, which started just about the time we came on the air. If there were Scuds fired into Saudi Arabia, we do not yet know that. What we do know is the all clear sounded here. Storyline of the hour is that Tariq Aziz in Moscow has presented his response, Saddam Hussein's response, the Iraqis' response to the Soviet peace plan. And Anthony Mason reported just a few moments ago that it's an offer of what is described as complete and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. Fuad Ajami, our CBS News consultant in the Middle East, is with us tonight at our New York headquarters. Fuad, what do you make of this?
Well, this is very interesting. I mean, I think to use the language of criminal prosecution, Saddam is a criminal who now wants to make sure that he gets immunity from prosecution. All along, now that Saddam understands that Kuwait is no longer the issue, that the issue is Baghdad, and the issue is himself, and the issue is his regime, and the fact that the President Bush, in effect, invited the people of Baghdad and the people around Saddam, the apparatus around Saddam, to throw Saddam's body over the ramparts of the city, and we would call quits to it. I think that in the end, what he really now wants to make sure of, and what he wants the Russians to get for him, is this immunity from prosecution.
I'm handed a note that says the U.S. military throughout the theater, throughout the Persian Gulf theater, has been placed on highest alert. Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Wyatt?
Dan, I must stress that we do not at this moment have official U.S. reaction, official White House reaction. As far as we can tell, President Bush himself is now absorbing exactly what the Soviets have said. However, we should report that any number of things about the Soviet announcement of this potential ceasefire go against some of the public things that the Bush administration has said, and I'll try to detail a couple of them. First of all, with the Iraqis saying, or the Soviets saying on their behalf, that they would withdraw a second day after a ceasefire, and that after two-thirds of their withdrawal, then all of the UN sanctions would be lifted. President Bush has been adamant all along that there be no conditions for an Iraqi withdrawal, and that will sound here, no doubt, like a list of conditions. Perhaps most potentially troubling, Dan, and again I stress we don't have official reaction from the president, is that the Soviet plan calls for all of the UN resolutions to cease to exist after Iraq would withdraw from Kuwait. That also flies in the face of several public White House pronouncements, including the fact that they will press the case for reparations, because those are among the resolutions, UN resolutions, and also that the United States would want to, in any event, continue the arms embargo against Iraq. It would not want any nation to be able to resupply Iraq's military. And in that case, the United States would probably, the president would probably not favor an ending to all the UN resolutions. So I'm not at all clear just how much optimism there should be behind the Soviet announcement tonight.
Wyatt?
Dan?
Fuad Ajami, should Saddam Hussein succeed in getting a ceasefire now under this "I will withdraw from Kuwait unconditionally," if that proves to be the actual case, what would be the effect first in what's called the Arab world and then worldwide in terms of what the military calls conflict resolution?
Well, Dan, I mean, this is Saddam's hope that he can make a tight escape and that he will have made a great daring escape. And in a way, if you listen to the speech now and if you try to read the speech, Saddam is now saying, well, look, everyone told me that if I mention the word withdrawal, if I talk about withdrawal from Kuwait, then the world I can get and everything will become possible. He now understands it isn't so. But if he makes a tight escape, if he really avoids these sanctions, and if he can get a ceasefire in place, I think it's a catastrophe for this effort that was waged against them. And I think that the American-led coalition, and I think the Americans, I think the Saudis and others understand this full well, and that's why one isn't terribly optimistic about their response.
David Martin at the Pentagon, have you been able to confirm this report that U.S. forces have been placed on highest alert throughout the theater?
No, Dan, I have not, although that certainly wouldn't surprise me because if we are coming up on a ground offensive, obviously the alert is going to be very, very high. And obviously, what has just happened in Moscow can change things. The Pentagon, from a strictly military point of view, would be opposed to any kind of ceasefire or bombing pause, waiting for Iraq to pull out of Kuwait. But if you have this very short period of one or 2 days for the pullout to begin, that may be a tough one for the Pentagon to respond to.
David, the flying weather's been bad here today. It is tonight, and the forecast is that it will be clearing sometime late tomorrow. Is it your thought, or is it not, that they are not likely to launch a big ground offensive without weather for what's called a full air cap, full air cover?
The clearer the weather, the better support you're going to have for your ground forces by air. And the way things have worked out so far, there have already been at least 2 instances where U.S. airplanes have mistakenly fired on U.S. troops. So anything that could make it easier to tell friend from foe, and obviously one thing would be clear weather, I think is going to be viewed as something they want to wait for.
Let's go back to Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Wyatt, there were reports today in at least one newspaper that President Bush was furious with Gorbachev for even getting into this at this stage. Were those reports true?
Dan, I don't know exactly whether the president was furious about it. I can tell you that he was quite worried, perhaps that this very scenario that we see being played out now in Moscow would play out this way, that the Soviets would offer Saddam Hussein a deal that potentially the United States could not accept. Dan?
Thanks, Wyatt. We'll be back with more live from Saudi Arabia in a moment.
13 cities in 10 countries across the Pacific. They're playing our song. United Airlines Royal Pacific Service, rededicated to giving you the service you deserve, halfway around the world. Come fly the friendly skies.
Rough, tight, dry skin? That stops with Curel. When you apply Curel regularly, you'll feel its fast-absorbing rehydration formula take over. First, it seals in the healing moisturizers. Then the soothing Curel therapy rehydrates your dry skin. First it seals, then it heals. There's a clear line between other moisturizing formulas and Curel's rehydration formula. Curel for dry skin. First it seals, then it heals.
When I say home by 11, I don't mean an hour later.
But Daddy...
Another Maalox moment. It's a medical fact. There's no faster therapy known for your stomach acid than Maalox. It's so strong, if you take it now, it starts working now.
Honey, I just can't help worrying about my little girl.
Daddy, I am 16.
Yeah.
Extra strength Maalox Plus. It's a medical fact. There's no faster therapy known. Look for the coupon in Sunday's paper.
Get the Grammys Inside Story in our backstage wrap-up and meet Playboy's Girls of Rock and Roll, only on Entertainment Tonight.
Tonight at 10:30.
It may be worth mentioning at this point that as best we can determine out of Moscow, that although Saddam Hussein has said he will withdraw from Kuwait, it is not literally an offer of unconditional withdrawal. Now, we're going to continue our CBS News coverage of events in Moscow, here in Saudi Arabia, where there is a report not yet fully confirmed that the U.S. military has been placed on its highest alert throughout the theater. So stay with this CBS News station. We'll be back in a few moments with more of our special coverage of these important events of tonight. Is peace at hand, or is this just the lull before a new desert storm of steel and fire? We'll be back in a few moments.
The reason 2 Oldsmobiles made the 1991 Consumers Digest Best Buys list is based on the same philosophy Oldsmobiles are built by. Exceptional value.
This is the new generation of Olds.
Well, it used to be where I'd spend this big chunk of my time running at half speed. Irregular. Well, I get this feeling right down here. Sort of sluggish, low energy. I didn't feel like working. And that's a problem when you're the new guy on the job. So then one day, my wife gives me this glass. And she says, here, have some Metamucil. I said, what? A laxative? She says, fiber. You're not getting enough of it. Metamucil is a natural fiber. It's not some harsh chemical laxative. It's safe and gentle enough to take every day. So when your system needs the extra fiber to keep running at full speed, when you're the new guy on the job, it's the only speed there is.
Natural fiber Metamucil. It can make a daily difference in how you feel.
It's not easy to pull yourself away from a bowl of Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Those 2 scoops of raisins taste so good you'll find that once you start you can't leave them behind. It's those 2 scoops that taste too good to pull yourself away. 2 scoops of raisins, golden flakes of bran. Get every bite you can. It's those 2 scoops that taste too good to pull yourself away. 2 scoops that taste too good in Kellogg's Raisin Bran. 2 scoops.
This is CBS.
Does this site look familiar? Can you relate to this? Being able to take it easy is what we all work so hard for. With American Home Design siding and trim, you'll never have to paint your house again, and you'll save energy dollars while increasing the value of your home. Just sit back, relax, and pick up the phone right now for your free estimate. American Home Design's free literature will give you all of the information that you need on our siding and trim, and energy-saving ideas on tilt-in, easy-to-clean windows,
plus patio doors. Here's Don Bruce with a special offer if you call right now.
Thanks, Paul. Winter is the slowest time of the year. To keep our factory at full production, we're slashing prices. Call now for the lowest prices ever.
And who says there are no more bargains? We guarantee our prices to be equal to or lower than the competition for 30 days. I'm Paul Eel saying make it easy on yourself. Call American Home Design right now.
Story of this. A report thus far not completely confirmed that the U.S. military has been placed on highest alert throughout the theater. The second confirmed but details unclear. Saddam Hussein has given his response to the Soviet peace proposal. He has offered to withdraw from Kuwait, but the offer is not without at least some conditions. Anthony Mason is in Moscow. Anthony?
Dan, President Gorbachev and Soviet Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz met tonight for about 2 hours in the Kremlin. During that meeting, Mr. Aziz brought the response from Saddam Hussein, which was, as the Soviets describe it, Iraq agreeing to a full withdrawal from Kuwait. Now, that withdrawal would begin on the second day after the ceasefire began. There are, as you say, some kind of conditions attached. There are other aspects which are still being discussed, will be discussed tomorrow. Here is what Gorbachev spokesman Vitaly Ignatyenko said in announcing the agreement a short time ago.
Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz presented the response to the plan put forward by Mikhail Gorbachev. The response is positive. Those responses, after their thorough discussion and the comparison of the various positions, the two parties came to the conclusion that it is possible to find a way out of the military conflict in the Gulf.
Now, there are, as you say, Dan, conditions attached to this, what the United States will probably view as conditions. These include that after the withdrawal of 2/3 of Iraqi forces from Kuwait, economic sanctions be lifted, that the withdrawal of forces be monitored by forces not involved in this conflict, and also that POWs all be released after a ceasefire. Now, there are still other details that are going to be discussed in further meetings here in Moscow tomorrow. We don't know what those details involve at this point. But as we say, as of this moment, there is an agreement from Tariq Aziz, the foreign minister from Iraq here in Moscow, that Iraqi troops are prepared to withdraw from Kuwait. Dan?
Let's go to Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Wyatt, how long would it be, in your estimate, before we have some reaction from President Bush or his administration?
Dan, I think that officially the president will react tonight. If not, his spokesman, Marlon Fitzwater, will react tonight. They have been, ever since this round of diplomacy began last Friday with Iraq's first offer to withdraw from Kuwait, the White House has been quick to react, and I expect that again tonight. Just picking up on what has been said, having talked now, or with the Soviets having announced that there is a possibility of a ceasefire, there are several areas in which the White House, by its own public statements, may have already preempted its own acceptance of these. As Anthony and you mentioned before, that the ceasefire would begin 2 days after an Iraqi withdrawal, and that after 2/3 of the withdrawal had happened, there would be an end to all of the economic sanctions. That appears to be a list of conditions for this withdrawal, when for the last 6 months President Bush has been clearest on the point that Iraq's withdrawal must be unconditional. One other main point. There's a third part of the Soviet peace initiative tonight in which, after the withdrawal, the Iraqis would demand that all of the UN resolutions, that is, all 12 of them, would quote-unquote cease to exist. Now, among them is, in the economic sanctions, and as part of those resolutions, is a worldwide arms embargo against Iraq, which Secretary Baker and President Bush have repeatedly said they want to continue. That is, no arms sales to Iraq, no matter how this war ends. And at least on those points, it appears that the Soviet offer and U.S. intentions are headed for a collision. Dan?
David Martin's at the Pentagon. David, what are you picking up there?
Well, Dan, there are two things in this, at least the initial accounts of this proposal, that are obviously going to cause the Pentagon serious problems. One we've already mentioned, which is the ceasefire. The withdrawal would not begin until the second day after the cessation of hostilities. The Pentagon has been adamant in saying that they are opposed to whatever you call it, a ceasefire or a bombing pause. Also, as announced in Moscow, this agreement also says that the withdrawal would be conducted according to a fixed timetable. The U.S., in the letter which President Bush sent to Mikhail Gorbachev, giving his reaction to the Soviet proposal, said that the withdrawal had to be immediate, and by immediate, he suggested 4 days, which would basically give the Iraqis enough time to get their troops out, but not enough time to pick up all their war material and take that with them. So this fixed timetable is going to be a real problem, but there's an awfully big carrot here, and of course that is the withdrawal of Iraq from Kuwait and the elimination of the need to go to a ground war.
Fuad Ajami, you've been watching and listening here. Your thoughts as this, what appears to be new, yet another new proposal for a ceasefire, or at least a delay from Saddam Hussein, becomes clear?
But Dan, I really believe this man, Saddam, in fact, is really talking to his own people. Let's remember one thing about politics. It really is about home. He's trying to tell his own people something. He's trying to implicate them in what's going on. He's trying to tell them, look, this is no longer about Kuwait. It's no longer about the withdrawal from Kuwait. It's really about you. It's about your army. It's about your state. And in the end, to respond to a question you had asked us earlier in the earlier segment, in a way, he would like to make President Bush's life as difficult as possible. He wants the coalition to wage war against him at the same time that, in a way, he'd offer the coalition a way out. He wants to make President Bush and King Fahd seem like warmongers. He really has never gotten the fact that if he really wants to surrender, the terms of surrender are clear. He wants to surrender to the Russians. He wants to surrender under more generous conditions than the ones that the coalition is willing to grant him. That's really what the essence of this story at this time is all about.
Bill Plan at the State Department, this places some real strains on the alliance, doesn't it?
It does, Dan. I want to mention that you heard Wyatt Andrews talk about some of the UN resolutions which the Iraqi offer does not address. There are a couple of more. It says nothing at all about the UN resolution which holds Iraq responsible for all financial losses. That means reparations. That doesn't get mentioned. Neither does recognizing the legitimate government of Kuwait. Those are two more sticking points. But in answer to your question, Dan, there is going to be, I feel almost certain, a very heavy campaign by the Soviets to remind the Secretary of State of the joint statement which the United States and the Soviet Union issued on January 29th, which says that they believe, quote, that a cessation of hostilities would be possible if Iraq would make an unequivocal commitment to withdraw from Kuwait. And I suspect that that is what the Soviets are going to say Iraq has done. So the possibility for mischief exists here, and you can be certain that the offer won't be viewed very kindly either here or at the White House.
Let's see if David Martin is still standing by at the Pentagon. David, there was this report earlier in the day that President Bush had privately conveyed a sense to Mikhail Gorbachev, at least, that any pullout from Kuwait by Saddam Hussein would have to include Saddam Hussein leaving his tanks and his basic equipment behind. Had you heard that? Did anyone at the Pentagon confirm that?
Well, I think it's he did convey that, although he didn't say it in exactly those words. What he did in that letter to Gorbachev, giving his reaction to the Soviet proposal, he said the Iraqis have to withdraw immediately, and then he defined immediately to mean 4 days. As a practical matter, when you say 4 days, you're saying there is not time to take your equipment out. All there is time to load up your troops on trucks and get them out. So it was the functional equivalent, by saying 4 days, the functional equivalent of saying he wanted Iraq to withdraw, leaving its equipment behind.
As Defense Secretary Cheney, President Bush, and others at the top decision-making circle of the Bush administration study the latest news out of Moscow, this what is described as a new proposal by the Iraqis for withdrawal from Kuwait, let's listen to the Soviet spokesman outlined the 8-point, what's called peace plan, just a few moments ago. This is how he put it.
First, Iraq states about its full and unconditional withdrawal of its forces from Kuwait. Second, the withdrawal of forces begins on the second day after the cessation of hostilities. The withdrawal of forces will take place in a fixed time frame. Fourth, after the withdrawal of 2/3 of all the forces, Iraqi forces from Kuwait, the economic sanctions envisaged by the UN will cease to apply to Iraq. Fifth, after the end of the withdrawal of Iraqi forces from Kuwait, thus the causes would cease to exist, the causes for the corresponding resolutions of the Security Council. So thus those resolutions would cease to be in effect. Sixth, right after the ceasefire, all the POWs will be immediately released. Seventh, the withdrawal of forces would be monitored by the countries not directly involved in the conflict, being so entrusted by the Security Council of the United Nations.
Some of the early reaction in Washington, very early reaction in Washington, seems to be leaning to the opinion, there's nothing more than that, the moment that this offer by Saddam Hussein and the Soviets still does not go far enough. We'll be following that storyline for you in the upcoming moments. But right now, let's go back to Fuad Ajami at our New York CBS News headquarters. Fuad, Saddam Hussein's whole lifetime has been one of playing the role of survivor. He really has a remarkable history of being able to absorb punishment and survive, doesn't he? His lifetime pattern is that he fights, then runs away, and lives to fight another day. Now, is he tonight, in your judgment, in the process of once again trying to do that, and is he likely to be given the opportunity to do that once again?
Well, I think exactly this is the essence of this story for Saddam. We're really talking about Saddam in a corner, but I think he really has now met a level of destruction and a crisis the like of which he'd never seen before. He's not fighting the Iranians, he's not fighting the Kuwaitis, he's not fighting the Kurds whom he could gas. This is a brand new world for him. And I think you're absolutely right. The decision is going to be made. How can this man who came from the little town of Tikrit and rose to great power, how can he withdraw from Kuwait and make sure that he can take his toys with him, he can take his weapons of mass destruction, and he can keep his regime intact, and he can try, that's all he can do. He can try to strike a bargain and seek that immunity from prosecution. And if he can't do this, he would like to make it as difficult as possible for President Bush and as difficult as possible for King Fahd to prosecute this war against him. This is what this strategy is about. Try to get a ceasefire, play with that ceasefire, and try to get in politics, try to get in diplomacy what you can't get on the battlefield. He saw what he could get on the battlefield, nothing. He saw the air campaign, the relentless air campaign of 1 month. So he's trying to reverse the military verdict through political and diplomatic means. That's what he wants from his Russian friends and his Russian patrons.
Tom Fenton is in Tel Aviv. Tom, what's the Israeli reaction so far? How does this play in Israel?
Well, Dan, this is what they would call the second worst scenario. The worst scenario would have been an agreement to withdraw before the fighting began. But now, with much of the war machine still intact, if the United States allows Saddam Hussein to go back home and survive, the Israelis are going to be very unhappy about it. Their interest was in having his war machine largely destroyed, and of course, although they wouldn't say it, to have Saddam Hussein deposed, or if not removed forever. So they're not going to be happy about this if this turns out to be a withdrawal and a compromise end to this conflict.
U.S. forces will continue fighting the Gulf until otherwise ordered to do so by the White House. This is despite Iraq's reported agreement to a Soviet proposal to end the war. This is the word of an official Defense Department spokesman. He said, and I quote, "We will continue with our game plan until otherwise ordered," unquote. Let's go to Washington and Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana, who joins us for reaction. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Your reaction, and what are you hearing about official administration reaction to these developments in Moscow tonight?
Well, I don't hear anything about official reaction. My reaction is that the proposal is a very, very serious one. I do not think we can lightly dismiss it, but I also think that it's unacceptable in several of its terms and probably needs some further negotiation.
Well, you say it's unacceptable in several of its terms. Can you be more specific? What terms concern you the most in way of conditions?
Well, I think the specific terms of withdrawal concern me. Will it be fast enough? He calls for the lifting of economic sanctions. I'd like to explore that a little bit. But I think the thing that concerns me most is the provision that says that all of the UN resolutions must be withdrawn. That's a very sweeping one, and we have to look at that with extreme care. Our position has always been that all UN resolutions have to be complied with.
Is it your opinion, Congressman, that President Bush can or cannot afford at this particular moment to quickly reject this as being too laden down with conditions?
My personal view is that we ought not to reject it too quickly. I think we'll have to take a very, very hard look at it. We do not want to get ourselves in the position that we are unwilling to consider carefully, seriously, a serious proposal, and I think this is a serious proposal. After all, it calls for an immediate pullout, unconditional pullout in Kuwait, and that's always been our chief objective.
But, Congressman, does it or does it not raise the possibility that we get into delay by talking, discussing these details of the conditions in Saddam, and every day we delay slows down our own military momentum, and for those of us, you and I, old enough to remember the Korean War, raises the specter of the kind of Panmunjom talk syndrome, where there is no clear resolution.
Well, that's precisely the risk, and that's why we have to weigh it carefully and seriously. The other side of that is that we do not want to lose a genuine opportunity for peace. After all, there are lives at stake here, not just American lives, that we have to give a lot of consideration to. The problem for us is that a muddy, ambivalent political solution could undercut a military victory, which we all feel is close. And that's why this presents for the United States an especially difficult dilemma, and the time pressures on the President are exceedingly great.
Congressman, what about the effect on the alliance?
I think you'll get different reactions in the coalition. Several of the coalition partners, I'm sure, will want to press on with the military victory. On the other hand, I think several others in the partnership will want us to, if not accept, at least explore very carefully this proposal.
Congressman, is it your opinion that this has involved, at least in part, a Gorbachev double cross? Gorbachev was supposed to be a member of the alliance, and he suddenly, right at the moment when it appears there's going to be a major and final ground offensive, comes up with this, let's delay a while and talk.
It's not very well timed from our standpoint, and I think that President Gorbachev is clearly trying to assert his agenda in the Middle East, reestablish himself as a major player in the post-war period there. This plan points up diverging interests between the United States and the Soviet Union with regard to the Middle East. All of those things I think we have to recognize and accept, but if this achieves our principal objectives, if it reasonably achieves them, then we must not reject it out of hand.
Congressman Hamilton, thanks for being with us. Retired U.S. Marine Corps General George Christ is with us now. He's our CBS News military consultant. General Christ, what's the effect on the military of these developments tonight?
Dan, I think from the military perspective, the most troubling thing is going to be the ceasefire. It's, after all, the air war that kept the pressure on, and the threat of the ground war, I think, that's finally flushed Saddam out in the open. The military is going to be very nervous about any sort of an open-ended or incomplete ceasefire. If this thing's going to go, they're going to want a very, very tight ceasefire, carefully controlled so that we don't pass any advantage militarily back to Saddam.
And the most important things that happened on the battlefield today, as seen from here in Saudi Arabia, General Chris, seem to be this big artillery firing by combined British and American units. Would you see that as part of the preparing the battlefield, softening up for ground offensive assault, or should we see it in some other perspective?
Dan, I think it's the guns of assault. We've had the air attacks going in now for about a week, increasing in Kuwait, and now the ground forces are beginning to bring in their heavy forces to play, the artillery, the probes, and the raids. So from the military point of view, the ground attack is in full readiness and proceeding apace.
If Saddam Hussein began withdrawing his troops from Kuwait tonight, how long would it take him to get them out?
Well, of course, Dan, it depends on whether we're going to let him get out with all of his equipment or we're going to let him walk out. He can walk out in about a day, 2 days, perhaps as long as the 4 days. He's got about 300,000 troops to get out of Kuwait proper. The remainder are in Iraq. So that's what he's dealing with. There's got a lot of equipment in there. If you're going to try to take all of the equipment out, you've got at least a week, maybe 2 weeks to get all that stuff out.
Iraq and the Soviet Union tonight agreed on steps that could lead to an Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait and an end to the Persian Gulf War. There's been no official reaction from the White House. Our CBS News special coverage of the developments around the Persian Gulf, in Moscow, Iran, and Washington continue after these messages.
Ziploc presents Fingerman.
Hi, I'm here to demonstrate a big new idea. That's right, introducing the new Gripper Zipper from Ziploc. Now the easiest closing bag there is. In fact, I can even close it, whoa, blindfolded. I know it's closing because I can feel the zipper grabbing hold. It's locking. Feel it close the first time, every time. And you don't have to see it to believe it. Ooh. Ziploc bags with the new Gripper Zipper. The easiest closing bag there is.
You know, you get so much more out of cold mornings when you've got energy. That's why I eat grape nuts. And I found a great new way to make it hot. Just pour your grape nut cereal, add milk, and microwave it for 1 minute. You've got this warm, hearty taste that feels so good. And a natural energy source to help keep you going. So, even if it's a cold morning, hot grape nuts helps make it a good one. Try it yourself.
Hot or cold, breakfast with Post Grape Nuts helps keep you going strong all morning long.
A cold always starts small. A stuffy nose, a little sneeze. But before you know it, your cold is full grown. That's when you need Dimetap, the grown-up medicine. If it was any stronger, you'd need a prescription. Maximum strength Dimetap Extend tabs work for 12 full hours. It's the way to relieve the congestion and sneezing of a full-grown cold. Dimetap, relief for the full-grown cold.
Anthony Mason in Moscow has an update on the Soviet Union and Iraq agreeing to a conditional plan under which the Iraqis would withdraw from Kuwait. Anthony?
Dan, I think one thing we should point out here is that there are still some details to be worked out. Tariq Aziz is going to remain in Moscow and will meet again with President Gorbachev tomorrow. One of the things that's still outstanding is the question of this so-called fixed time frame under which Iraq would withdraw. How fast is it going to be? Is Iraq going to be able to take its armor out? So there are still some details that are going to have to be worked out. We don't yet know how the White House has responded to this or how they're going to respond to anything more which would be under the label conditions, I think the White House would call them. President Gorbachev has reportedly called President Bush tonight to fill him in, but as I say, there is still more information to come on this sometime tomorrow. Dan?
Bill Plant at the State Department. Bill?
No reaction from the White House or the State Department. In fact, we understand the president is scheduled to go to Ford's Theater tonight. But there probably will be something at some point out of this administration. And the betting here is that it will be that the administration will find this unsatisfactory. There are conditions in this, a number of conditions, and the line since the beginning of August, since the UN resolutions were voted toward the end of August, has always been the same. He has to pull out of Kuwait, and he has to observe all 12 of the UN resolutions. And there are a number of them that are not even mentioned in this offer, which was conveyed by the Soviets. So the outlook from here, not very positive.
Dateline Washington by the Associated Press and Terrence Hunt, the AP's White House correspondent, who's about as plugged in as anybody around the White House journalistically. He says that President Bush is studying the Soviet-Iraqi proposal to end the Persian Gulf War with a conditioned withdrawal of Saddam Hussein's army from Kuwait, but, and this could be important, an initial analysis from President Bush's administration was skeptical. There's been no official comment from the White House or the Pentagon, but what Terry Hunt of the AP describes as one knowledgeable official, this is a pretty high-ranking official who doesn't want his name used, says of the plan, and I quote, "It's got serious problems." This official goes on to say, again quoting, "The Iraqis are talking about voiding other UN resolutions, including reparations for damage they did to Kuwait." This official goes on to say that essentially would be letting them get away with it. This high-ranking Bush administration official spoke only on the condition of anonymity. Now, we're told that the Kremlin contacted the White House with details of the plan as it was being made public in Moscow. So they apparently wasn't either there wasn't an opportunity or there was no effort made to let President Bush know ahead of the public what the details of this plans were. Wyatt Andrews at the White House. Wyatt?
Dan, we are still awaiting any official word whatsoever while the president and his team apparently studies the Gorbachev proposal. There has also been a wire account that President Gorbachev called President Bush to brief him on the details of what's been proposed. No official confirmation even of that yet. It's obvious, though, here, Dan, that the president has a dilemma on his hands. It seems that his two options here are to reject this as unacceptable to what he himself has said before, both on the conditionality and also on letting all the UN sanctions and resolutions go away. And it's his other option is to go back to President Gorbachev and ask for some modifications. It's very clear that if an outright rejection would first cause all kinds of problems with the coalition and partnership that has been built up between the U.S. and the Soviets, could possibly cause a big propaganda fight both at the United Nations and globally about who is right and who is doing the right thing, and may go to some sort of squabbling match at the United Nations. So again, it's either go back for modifications or reject it outright. That appears to be the president's dilemma.
David Martin, I have only a few seconds left in this segment. Anything late from the Defense Department?
Dan, there's still no official Pentagon reaction, but it's clear that what they will almost certainly think of this proposal is that it may be full withdrawal, but it's not immediate withdrawal because it calls for a fixed timetable, and the U.S. wants to see immediate withdrawal.
Thanks. David Martin at the Pentagon. Nerves are raw on this raw night in the desert. There are no stars over the sand. Instead, a light, low fog with an eerie glow has set in. Is peace at hand, or is this the lull before a ground war storm of steel and fire? Before this night is out, we may know the answer. Dan Rather for CBS News. Stay tuned to this CBS station.
Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage of the war in the Gulf. This is CBS.
Welcome to town, folks. I've got some great houses to show you near schools, churches,
Have
parks,
you got
clubs.
anything close to a Food Lion store?
Food Lion?
We just love shopping at Food Lion.
Yeah, but there are other supermarkets all over the
Not
whole...
like Food Lion, not with extra low prices.
On the things we buy most.
I guess we're just hooked on Food Lion.
Food Lion sells major categories of groceries for less than anybody else.
Yeah, well, moving along. Now, how many square feet are you looking for?
Oh, I'd say 30,000.
With big wide aisles.
Fast checkout.
Our friendly service.
Fresh produce.
Picture Frame Warehouse is having a sale. Very shortly, Picture Frame Warehouse will be expanding its Sidco Drive location. Now, before we start knocking out walls, We want to sell as much inventory as possible, so we don't have to move it. For the entire month of February, every original oil painting in stock at both Picture Frame Warehouse locations will be on sale at 50% off.
Citgo Drive across from Garcia's Mexican Restaurant and in Rivergate at Myatt and Gallatin Road.
How would you cope if you lost your job? Could you sustain yourself financially through an extended job search? Or would you lose everything? A recession could leave many of us facing these unpleasant possibilities. We'll show you how to prepare for the worst financially and how to deal with the emotional strain of finding yourself out of work. In a Focus 5 report Tuesday at 10 on News Channel 5. More news, more experience, more often.